Right, very good morning once again. Welcome on board, and for those that went with us into the break, I'm glad that you're still with us. If you're just joining us from wherever you're watching Morning at NTV, we are glad you have chosen this, your companion and breakfast show. We are at the Kickstarter segment, and we're going to be talking economics and the economy. So for those of us that have been, experiencing a little bit of turbulence, it could be in the wallet, it could be in the pocket, it could be in the safe for those that still have, or rather have safes at home where you keep some of that extra money. It will also be, of course, of high interest here. The impact of currency depreciation on export competitiveness. We shall also be talking the effects of currency fluctuation on business growth, and of course how the economy is primed and how it can be better going forward. I'm joined by a panel of experts who will be sharing perspective and information on the latest in order to embolden our understanding of matters. But before I introduce them, let's look at a preamble. For many countries fighting to bring down inflation, the weakening of their currencies relative to the dollar has made that fight harder. On average, the estimated path, though, of a 10% dollar appreciation into inflation is 1%. Such pressures are especially acute in emerging markets and a greater share of dollar-invoiced imports compared with advanced economies. We shall be understanding why the rate of 3,927 against 3,937 has seen a 4% depreciation since the start of the year to at least 0.6. That's a lot of figures I'm trying to throw around, but don't worry, we shall get over it and around it. I'm joined on site by usual suspect. He's a man who speaks authoritatively on matters of economy. He has been able to speak to people in the corridors of power. He's told us once that he has advised many. Whether they take that advice remains to be seen. You're most welcome, Dr. Fred Muhumuza.
Thank you very much. Morning, our viewers. The advice is, are you going to take it yourself? Forget about the others.
That's interesting. We're also joined by Honorable Hassan Kirumira. He's Member of Parliament for Katikamu South and also member of the National Economy Committee in Parliament. Many thanks for joining us.
Good morning, our viewers, and good morning, Ugandans.
And of course, we're joined by John Walugembe. He's the Executive Director at the Federation of Small and Medium Enterprises. He superintends over a docket that is hard hit by some of these pressures, and we shall be understanding how he's cushioning some of that pain and what exactly is going to be done. Gentlemen, allow me to begin with Dr. Fred Muhumuza to give us an overview of where we are right now. The shilling has been on what's being described as a steady rise against the dollar since August, but of course the World Bank announced the freezing of loans to Uganda over human rights issues. I don't want to politicize this at any one point in time, but the exchange rate has been depreciating. Right now where we are is a place of cautious optimism, so to speak. Am I right when I use that word?
Yeah, you're right, certainly, because I've also said it in government documents, especially when Bank of Uganda is giving us a monetary policy statement. They always put what are the upside risks, what are the downside risks, the thing that you may leverage. So they will say if global economy recovers and the logistical networks across the globe are not disrupted, this is what may look like. If those don't come through, this is what may look like. For that reason, we have maintained our rate. They are going conscious. They don't want lower, they don't want rise. So they are being conscious, so it's a terminology that is in everybody's mind. But I would say this should not be coming to us as a surprise. You have already given a preamble saying when the World Bank suspended the future loans, we could foresee some of these things coming through. Now some people did not really appreciate all those things. They said, well, we can do without the World Bank. Now the World Bank engagement is a signal to many other investors.
That's right.
So you're not only missing out on the World Bank money, but you're also missing out on who else would have come in because the World Bank is here. Who else would have come in because the Europeans, and there are many others who cut without even notifying us. You also have those who may be relocating their money because people look futuristic.
That's right.
Economics works on expectations. So I am in Uganda. What do we expect Uganda to be? We are seeing African countries struggling with debt. Some of them, their currencies are struggling. Our neighbor Kenya hasn't had a good deal either. And many people here have been saying, oh, at least we're better than Kenya. No, but you want to look at the underlying drivers, because the storm may be coming your way. It hasn't reached you, but it's coming your way. So you want to look through all those kind of things and say, where are we going? So when you look through the dynamics of what drives the economy, because exchange rate really is a question of supply and demand. People are demanding dollars, and there are those who are supplying them. Now, some of the suppliers will have come here to invest in government papers. They are coming here to invest in a government bond or treasury bills or whatever it is. They bring in dollars.
That's right.
Now, they may want to leave. If they think Kenya is giving them a better opportunity, US is giving them a better opportunity, interest rates are rising globally, these fellows, you cannot own them. They will wake up one morning and decide to leave. Now, when they are leaving, they will definitely buy the dollars, because that's what they can take back abroad.
Can take back, yeah.
You also have, and it's a very fundamental thing, I see people talking about the difference between GDP, and they disregard what we call the gross national income. Gross national income is the income of Ugandans, both at home and abroad. GDP is income you have produced inside Uganda's borders. Yeah. Part of that is not your money. It belongs to those foreign companies that have invested here. It is within your borders, your domestic production.
Capital flight.
But it's not your money.
Yeah.
So when MTN makes its money, Stanbic makes its money, and they want to move their profits, you have no right to stop them. So you want to look at that consciously, to say, would Stanbic and MTN decide to leave these 100 billion they have made in profits here, or will they take them away? If you give them good conditions, they will keep it here. If they find another better option abroad, they will take it away. So you want to be looking at that there are certain companies that invest here, and maybe around this time, they want to move their profits out. So they are going to buy dollars and take them away. So all those drivers are out there, and we want to be watching them. But the other most critical thing, because our biggest reliable source of dollars is either tourism, coming here, remittances of Ugandans who went abroad, which have called gross national income, is being made out there, but by Ugandans, and they will send it here. So you want to watch their spaces, the countries where they work, but also our genuine exports. Now, I am finding some disturbing signals that it is now better to invest in government bonds than to actually do production. So if I get a 10 billion, 1 billion, whatever amount of money, rather than going into fishing, flowers, maize and beans and dairy, you'd rather just put that money into a government bond and go home and sleep. It is going to give you 18%, 17%. So if it's a billion, you're really going to get 170 million profit by sitting at home and watching your billion. It's intact. The 170 is coming to you. Divide that by 12 months. Really, you're getting some almost 15 million a month. Who wants to go and labor setting up a factory that will export? So those are dynamics that you want to be watching, and they might be drivers of some of the struggles we are having. All
right, we'll be looking forward to hearing those particular struggles and how the bond market, for example, is performing in light of what we've come to know as a little bit of confusion in that particular sector. Yes. Of course, I'm sure you'll be sharing a bit of that. Allow me to come to the Executive Director at the Federation for Small and Medium Enterprises. He's the man who understands the fluctuations and the workings around the dollar and the shilling on a daily basis because of the businesses that many of your members are involved in. I'm sure when it comes to making phone calls on working within working groups, yes, this must be a topic that is has many pain points. If you don't mind sharing quickly, so we can understand where we are.
Okay, so first of all, when you see the shilling slide, it has some positives and some negatives. Negatives because a lot of manufacturers have to import inputs, intermediate inputs, raw materials and so on. So it means that those inputs become more expensive. When they become more expensive, it means that the final products that they sell to Ugandans will also end up becoming more expensive. And this is how this contributes to inflation. It's not so significant, but it does contribute to inflation. And then you also have the fact that exporters, ideally, if we are a manufacturing country, a weak shilling should make our exports more competitive. We are lucky, of course, we've been having a trade deficit over time. For instance, in 2022, it was about $4.77 billion. But we're happy that that has started to turn around. I think by last year, by December, we had a trade surplus with the EAC of about $22 million. The EU ambassador also reported that now Uganda has been able to export goods worth 3.3 trillion Ugandan shillings to the EU, while importing only 2.9 trillion. So I think if Uganda continues on this path, and I hope that Ugandans will not continue investing in government securities like
return on investment.
Yeah,
let us encourage. I think we need to encourage Ugandans to stop investing in real estate, malls, and then going into government securities, well, because it will hurt us long term. So if Ugandans continue to invest in production, then we are likely to see a turnaround, and that also goes to the tourism sector, among others. Okay. Now, the other issue that Doctor has mentioned, the issue of grants and loans. I think it's something that should concern us. If we can find a way of negotiating with the World Bank to ensure that they can reinstate some of this support, I think it will go a long way in ensuring that it will stabilize the shilling. And not just the World Bank, but all these concerns, anyone who brings in money into this economy should be welcomed, and we have the discussions later. That also goes to issues around DGF. You know, DGF used to bring in a lot of money here for NGOs and so on and so forth. So I think this is also something we need to relook at and say, okay, is there a way in which we can bring DGF back in a way that gives comfort to all parties, but still the money is still coming into the country. I think that would definitely help. Now, the other issues also around remittances. I was trying to look at the figures, and I was seeing that actually our remittances have not recovered to the pre-COVID-19 levels. Yeah, so how do we ensure that we encourage Ugandans to keep remitting this money back home? And I know we are exporting labor to the Middle East and so on, but we also need to be more strategic. We need to ensure that we export professionals, because professionals are going to earn more and they're going to send more money. If you look at Kenya, for instance, they have very many professionals, business people and so on and so forth. So I think as we educate our young people, let's be strategic. The NHS in the UK is struggling, doesn't have qualified nurses, doctors, and so on. Let's ensure that we train as men. Let's train, and this is where I agree with the president on the issue of scientists, but not us to pay them, but to export them, because we can't afford these rates that the president wants us to pay scientists. We can't afford, but if we can export them to other countries, that will help a great deal in making sure that some of these things are moderated. Okay,
that's an interesting observation, and I know that it will be, it should be taken on, especially when it comes to exportation of medics. Medics from Uganda are widely acclaimed across the globe. Honorable Chirumira, you are sitting in what I would see as a vantage point, where you're looking at the economy from a bird's eye view. As a legislator sitting on the National Committee on the Economy, you are dealing with these matters as brought to the committee, but also to craft legislation that takes us to points where the economic transformation that is widely needed is achieved. What's your take on how the economy is performing, and what is the committee right now dealing with in terms of what it has on the table?
First of all, I need to give great thanks to Dr. Muhumuza, my fellow panelists, for zooming us into our economy. I've grown to love how Dr. Muhumuza looks at our economy over years. Okay. And his opening remarks was very touching. They talk, but people do not listen. Because economics does not lie. You forecast and predict events to happen. If nothing is done, events will happen, and it will affect our country. And that is the most painful thing, that economists will provide data. on the basis of different trends and provide that data to government for them to implement. But lack of implementation has always been our biggest issue. Like on this issue of our depreciating currency, I mean, really, we all knew what would happen. If government is not coming to implement what they're supposed to do, like issues of human rights, we cannot have a country that is continuously abusing human rights, and then we expect this international organization to continue giving us money. I mean, this year we are looking at the budget framework paper. The budget support has been cut completely, and that's a whole lot of money that has been running our economy. That has a direct effect on how our economy is going to run going forward. And it comes back to government. Are we doing what we are supposed to do? And the answer is no. The Committee on National Economy, we are giving instructions by the Speaker on the 30th of January to look at the state of indebtedness in our economy. Are we even managing with the current debt that we have? It is surging. If you look at our budget framework paper, over 22 trillion is borrowed money. We have to borrow, in addition to what is already a burden to Ugandans in terms of our debt. And now we are having this whole issue of currency depreciation on things that could have been avoided by government. So we are putting our country, and especially the business community, in a situation they do not understand because of political decisions. And that is dragging our country backwards. Because, I mean, you can argue, like they have continuously argued, that this depreciation of our currency is going to help increase our exports. That is the line of argument they look at. But what kind of exports do we have as a country? What do we export? Is it really going to make us competitive in the world market because of our devalued currency? I don't think so, because even the quantity of our exports is still questionable. So I think the whole idea, like Dr. Muhumuza has mentioned, we need to focus on domestic production and make sure that what is done here is good enough, and maybe export labor, skilled labor, and plan to get incomes from abroad. But if we are not intentional and deliberate on what we are supposed to be doing as a country, we shall continuously drag our country backwards. I feel for the business community. Right now, with the increasing value of the dollar, imports are going to be extremely expensive. Raw materials that are used in production, actually, not even the business people, the consumers of goods are going to suffer. And do not be surprised with inflation rates and increase in the prices of goods and services. It all goes back to government and planning. We have the whole National Planning Authority. What are they doing? We have to look into these things and plan for our country. And the moment we fail to plan for our country, we shall continuously drag our country into that. And that's what we are supposed to avoid as leaders.
Interestingly, when you ask the question, what is the National Planning Authority doing, I will assure you, or not assure you, but inform you that many reviews you will face give the National Planning Authority some good score in terms of what job they are up to, but how interconnected they are with other agencies of government is perhaps one of the issues that come up for questioning. Doctor, I'll be coming to you very shortly, especially on some of the issues that the Honourable raises, but allow us interrogate on the front of the business community. Right now, you've spoken, or rather shared, an idea about the exploitation of medics and professionals. I heard the other day, I was trying to interact with some members in the diaspora, and there is a shift now in terms of how their money returns home. It is now more of remittances in terms of help to family members and the immediate people, but not investment. For example, very few Ugandans working abroad are investing or making investment decisions in Uganda, and that's where the big money should be going. Sending a few dollars to Chris Higenyi and another person really is not as instrumental as it should be. And now that is causing a little bit of another problem. They are not confident in the investment climate here in order to bring their money back so as to help the economy grow. That is a challenge that must be quickly dealt with. I don't know how best or what advice is being conjured up within the community to be able to help them or give them the information they need in order to drive their money back here.
Okay, first of all, I want to, before I comment, I want to say that we have a national planning authority. If we didn't have this rationalization, I would propose that we have a national implementation.
That's the whole executive.
I would suggest that we have a national implementation authority.
Interesting.
Whose job is to ensure that people do what they say they are going to do. Because people say things and they assume that having said them, they are done. You see? So the challenge with us is really implementation. It's not that we lack ideas. It's not like we don't know what ought to be done. But once you've budgeted and the money is released, you now find all kinds of excuses. Now let me turn to the issue of the diaspora. I think the Uganda Investment Authority, with all due respect, in my view, needs to wake up. You cannot attract investment while you're seated here and you're building a few things here and there. Some of these are low-hanging fruits. Ugandans who want to invest back home, but they've been having a lot of challenges over time. You know that they've been complaining, oh, we send money back and then it's misused and stuff like that. So Uganda Investment Authority should ensure that these diasporas, as they invest back home, there is a system in which this money is used to do what it's supposed to do. Otherwise, if you don't give them that confidence, they say, you know what, I'm better off investing where I am. And as a country, we lose out. So I think we need to be more deliberate in reaching out to people in the diaspora, in creating conditions that ensure that if I'm a relative of somebody in the US and I steal their money, they send me back to buy a house, then I take random pictures and send them, and then they come back here
and find nothing.
Yes, there should be a help desk at the investment authority to follow up and to make sure that this person actually accounts for this money. So I think we need, this is work that we need. If we look at how we earn money, issues of tourism, issues of exports, issues of remittances, these are things within our control. The issues of grants and loans, we must also understand that as people give us money, they also have their conditions. So sometimes if you're poor, you have to accept certain conditions even though you don't like them. Some of us who are employees, you may not like your boss, but you have to work because you need the money. You see, you can't say, you man, I don't like you, let me go, because you sleep hungry. So if you're a country and you're Uganda and you need money, and someone says you compromise on ABCD, try to compromise. Of course, you tell him that, you see, you cannot use your money to try to impose your values on man. And this is why I agree with government that what the World Bank and the US and so on may be doing in some view is that they may be crossing lines by trying to impose certain value systems on the country. But as a country, we can also sit and negotiate and reach a win-win kind of situation with them so that we don't lose that money. The issue of just stamping, we are okay, we are resilient and so on, I think that completely does not help us as a nation. And then I also need to give Ugandans, I don't want us to give the impression that it's only Uganda that is going
grappling
through
with these economic challenges.
This situation is global. A lot of countries in the West are still struggling with inflation. Thankfully, ours is arrested. That's also a plus for the central bank and others. And in fact, part of the reason why the shilling is weakening is that portfolio investors are finding it easier to make returns back home. They say, why should I take my money to Uganda if I can make it back in the US? So that is also the issue, is that because of rising interest rates in the West, you find that a lot of these investors are pulling out their capital back to their home countries. If you look at Rwanda's franc depreciated around 4.6% by the end of last year. the Kenyan shilling was about 5.4. In fact, it was the Ugandan shilling that was doing well. Now, ours has depreciated by 4%. It's like saying, I'm the second last, but at least there's someone who is who is doing worse than me.
Interesting.
So we are not doing very well, and I hope we don't slide further. We make every effort that is in the book to ensure that we don't slide further, but we are not as bad as situation might appear.
Dr. Mhomza, what's your take on these submissions before I can ask a question regarding what he says, offshore investors fleeing in light of low interest rates here, occasioned by a hike in interest rates in advanced economies that offers greater return?
Of course, that's one of the issues that may be shifting them. But those are what we call fly-by-night investors. These are
fly-by-night investors.
Yes, they are like bats. they will come in. When the morning comes, they disappear. Bats have to hide during the time. Now, you don't want to rely more on those.
Okay.
The real investor I'm bothered with is one who would have come to set up a factory, set up a farm. If that investor is leaving, then you're losing a lot more. And we've seen quite a number of those relocating to Tanzania and being attracted to Tanzania. Because they're looking at a longer term signal. I want to be in Uganda for 30 years. I'm bringing $100 million. What is Uganda giving me in terms of security, in terms of the politics, in terms of implementation? Because if you keep saying, I'm going to put a port at Bukasa, this is 20 years down the road. That port is not there. We're going to do an industrial park in Namave. We started in 1998. It's not there.
We are still building.
You are going to do... Now, the investor is looking at that. Because when he's coming in, he's saying, where will the infrastructure come from? And as he said, you're talking, but you're not implementing. My oil is going to come out of the ground. When it does, things will be okay. We have already seen people who relied on oil burning their fingers and heads and feet. So the real investor you really want is that kind of investor. And that investor is not reading the right signal. What are your levels of income? You have told me you're going to reduce your poverty. We still have, on average, Ugandans earning 300,000 a month. That is 10,000 a day. If it's a family of 5, that is 2,000 per person per day. Is that a person I want to set up a factory? Depending on, and what will they buy?
What will they buy?
And if I look into the exports, where am I going to export? I mean, these are the things that his investors, the big ones and the small ones, are looking at. And eventually, the small ones may not have where to go. The big ones are certainly going to say, I'm going to Tanzania, I'm going to elsewhere. I'm looking at the numbers. Our imports from Tanzania are growing.
Yes.
That road from Masaka to Mutukula is not just breaking down because the lake is in the neighborhood. No, there are trucks.
Yeah, a lot of trucks.
And they're coming this way. They are not going the other way. And some of them, when you check what are they carrying, are things we could have produced here.
Rice.
And I was shocked the other day. Somebody told me the rice and the maize flour on the market is from Tanzania.
So you begin to say, what are we? What are we doing? Now, Ugandans who have shifted into government bonds.
Passion fruit.
And the Tanzanians are producing the real thing that give jobs
to the
people, create dollars for themselves, because nobody who has invested in the government bonds is going to create dollars. You're only relying on the rare event that government will use that money wisely. And I'm yet to see that, because the government is borrowing, paying the, salaries, maintaining itself, the politics and all sorts of things, security, critical things, but we call them fundamentals. They are necessary but not sufficient for growth. They don't drive growth, but you need them around. You need a road. But if I don't find trucks on that road carrying bananas and cows and milk, then your economy is not in there. So you want to look at these kinds of things. And as we're saying, when the National Planning Authority is planning, they produce a plan. Now, real development happens out of a strategy. Me and you, I will tell you, I have a plan to go to Guru. But it's the strategy that actually will get me there.
Yes, right.
If all of a sudden I hear, oh, Karuma Bridge has been disrupted, I will change strategy. But I still have my plan to get to Guru. So you don't just celebrate and say, me, I have my plan. Your strategy is more important. Now, do we have a strategy which goes into implementation? And I think sometimes I don't see that strategy that will launch you there. We're still stuck on a plan. We have 69 flagship projects. Get a plane here, get all sorts of things. Now, those really are the ones that will bring you down. Diplomacy. a lot of global relations, we always don't agree on the same things. But diplomacy helps you to keep in bed with your enemy. To say, you guys, the Americans are still the major funders of our HIV/AIDS program.
Yeah, sure.
So you don't want to go back and say, oh, there was homosexuality, they left. There was diplomacy in that space, which kept that line flowing through. They are still giving us a lot of those things. So how are we engaging diplomatically? What is foreign affairs doing? When the World Bank says, I'm suspending, can you engage? And they are ready to engage. And I think some engagements have been going on, but they are taking too long. The economy is beginning to feel that delay.
All right, we're going for a short break, but when I return, I'll go straight to Honorable Hassan Chirumira on two aspects. One, the Uganda Investment Authority's mandate and its increasing challenges to carry out its job. Just the other day, and something that has actually been covered by the Daily Monitor, an official from Uganda Investment Authority doesn't have an idea about the fact that Yang Tang Group has offered to transfer Luzira prisons from where it is right now to Buyikwe at its cost. And this is something that is quite queer. This is a company that says it's going to establish a 5-star hotel in line with what appears to be the new kid on the block, MICE. That is the new mantra around meetings, incentives, and then conferences and events. And then the other thing should be about the fact that if we are to begin moving at a certain direction, like he says, we need a strategy. We have too many plans around. How exactly is legislation an anchor to this? We need to find out. Otherwise, at the end of the day, we shall also be asking members of parliament to form a committee on implementation. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're glad you're still with us here. The Kickstarter, we are discussing Uganda's economic challenges and are trying to add our 2 cents to how a way can be mapped in order for us to achieve some of the key socio-economic gains that many would want to see. I had promised when we were going into the break that when we return, the Honorable Hassan Chirumira, MP for Katikamo South, who is also a member of the Committee of National Economy, will take us through how the Uganda Investment Authority is doing its work. The mandate to be able to bring on board investors and ensure that they have the best possible incentives and the environment in order to do business and increase production for Ugandans to be able to get jobs and later on be able to demand the goods and services that can spur economic growth. But the UIA continues to lament about the fact that it's not involved in any of the significant investments that will be rolling out into the country, including the latest that has become now controversial, the relocation of Luzira prisons. A Chinese company, Yang Tang Group, has approached the president and offered to relocate the correction facility on its own cost, but Uganda Investment Authority doesn't have an idea. Honorable Hassan Chirumira, the Committee on National Economy, is it aware that there is an impending relocation of the largest correction facility in the country?
Of course, like Ugandans, they'll continue asking who is in charge of our country.
That's a political statement.
Who is in control of things?
Yeah.
Of course, people continue to blame the Investment Authority and kill them, send them all lots of messages. But the bottom line is that we all know it's the executive doing all this, and that is a fact. I mean, if you put up an authority, you have to empower it to do work. And that's why I'm not surprised with this whole rationalization that is going on and all the bills that came to Parliament, because they want to rationalize. They do not see significance of these agencies and authorities anymore. Very, very unfortunate. Well, of course, I cannot take away the blame entirely from them, because we all know there is a narrative that Investment Authority has also not been favoring foreign investors at the expense of our locals. So there's a whole lot of questions. If you ask them now, do they have data of Ugandan businesses that start up? And we all know some of them close in a period of 2 years. Do they have a track records of businesses that are started in Uganda, and to what extent do they survive in our context? Or they are only focusing on foreign investors because they are bringing in money, and that's where I have a problem. The other thing, if you look at our investment options as a country, what have they done? I think it was Dr. Mumza was talking about tourism here of air, and the kind of money that we could be getting from the tourism sector. If you look at comparative studies, countries around us, Rwanda, they are reaping a lot of money from tourism because of their level of investment in tourism. But us here, who have I think we have the best attractions within the East African region. Are we investing enough to reap money from that kind of investment? I do not think so. If you look at the budget of tourism in Uganda and compare it with the budget of tourism sector in Rwanda, there's a big gap. And that means that our investment options as a country are still skewed. They are not understandable. So going forward as a country, it takes us back to planning and implementation. If we fail to plan and implement for the greater good for his country going forward, we shall continuously be dragged backwards. And the bigger picture here, we cannot skip talking about government. It is government responsibility to bring things together and make sure that the machine runs properly.
Okay. Debt management, I can describe this as an existential threat. If we do not take care of our debt, bring it under control, we are bound to go over the cliff. How are we doing on this? What has been put into the pipeline to address the matter?
I think it's really a question of sometimes you'll say semantics, academics, practitioners. He was talking about who among us has a more stable currency. Mr. Museveni's 10-point program, number 5 was a self-sustaining national economy. You want in the first place to say, who was sustaining my currency? If that's not an internal process, get worried even if you're better than the others.
That's right.
If a breakdown is pulling your car, don't celebrate and say, aha, the car has begun to move. Man, you need that engine working again. So, whether Rwanda is in bad place and why you want to say, why am I in a good shape? If you are in good shape because foreigners are coming to invest in debt in your country, not in factories, then you need to get concerned because those guys will go away.
They will.
If you're being sustained by, as we've said, foreign loans and donations and grants and all sorts of things, then again you need to get worried because those foreigners can change anything. And the world is changing very, very rapidly. And in our debt management strategy, we need to factor in that. That the people who are lending you money for development have been shifting. In the 90s, loans were pegged to politics. Are you for me or not for me? Then I lend you money. Now, towards the end of the 90s, countries noticed and the development practitioners, and they said, no, pegging loans to politics will punish the citizens. So Zimbabwe will have no supporter because you disagree with Mugabe. Ugandans will have no supporter. So the British created what they called the Department for International Development, DFID. For it, it would invest for a humanitarian cause, regardless of whether you are not in the good books with the British. Your development agenda would still be supported. Now, we have switched back. If you don't support with me on a political angle, I'm not going to even send my money to you. And that's why the Anti-Homosexuality Act comes in. If this was 10 years ago, maybe it wouldn't have taken that trend. They would have said, as we talk diplomatically and see, as far as the development continues. Now, if those are not happening through, then you get into a problem of how do you manage your debt. So debt management is no longer debt to my GDP and what I've done as a strategy. There is that global discussion. But so there is futuristic, what are the trends going to look like? What obligations do you have? What are you using with your money, that money you have borrowed? Now, the sad part in Uganda, people do not necessarily recognize part of the debt. You would hear people say, oh, the donors have gone, at least I have my money, which you have borrowed from the domestic market. It's not your money.
It's not your money.
That is also debt. Now, people are not treating domestic borrowing with the seriousness that we put on foreign borrowing. And foreign borrowing sometimes conditionality.
Yeah.
The World Bank would say this is for this. African Development Bank would say this is for schools. So you don't move it. Now, local borrowed money, we are using it for salaries, for fuel, for inland travel, travel abroad. Now, that is not the purpose of borrowed money. You want to use your borrowed money in areas that will help you to pay it back. Now we have about 8 going to 9 trillion, which was simply rolling over, meaning it has matured, but you are unable to pay it. But when you roll it over, you have to pay the interest. Now the interest is also going to hit 7 trillion. Now, what are you playing around? Are you managing your debt? Are you surviving? What is the impact on the economy? What's the impact on the private sector that is borrowing? And is supposed to be borrowing from those same spaces. And as I've said now, for a bank to lend anybody, they need a fixed deposit. A fixed deposit is going to be comparable to either a 91 or 180 treasury bill. If I lend to government, what is government giving me for a year? Government is giving you possibly 12, 15. Now a bank is also going to borrow, either from another bank or from me, and you are not going to use our money. I want to fix it there at 12%. Now that's the cost of mobilizing money. Now this bank is going to lend to his people at what rate? They are risky.
24.
So they're going to end up in 24. Now, what am I going to get as a small business? I must get a return of 30 to pay the bank at 24 and remain with my profit of 6. Out of 6, I pay fees, I pay medical, I pay rent, I pay taxes. I mean, you're really running the economy down. As I've said, the vehicle is slowing down, and you don't rely and say, this neighbor has a breakdown. This vehicle has got to restart. For me, that's the major conversation. Management of debt must say, be looking at how do I revive this economy. Growth of 6% is not good enough at all for this economy with all its burdens. A plane must run at a certain speed to take off.
That's right.
Honorable Kasaija said the plane has taken off, but the plane came down. It didn't reach cruise level. Now, how do we get this plane back on the runway?
Don't worry. The plane is now like this. It is preparing to again shoot.
And remember, the worrying part is when it takes off and can't pick traction, you're either coming back the same runway or you're going to end up where there is no runway at all. So where is Uganda
Interesting
now?
There.
Me and you can discuss.
From the private sector perspective, debt management must be something that you handle a little bit more promptly than the government would. I don't know whether there has been any point, at any one point, where your 2 cents on that issue has been sought, or away from the fact that government could be shifting from, or rather shifting to the private sector when it comes to borrowing.
So first of all, I think that it's the auditor. There's a report that Ministry of Finance worked on. I think it's on debt sustainability. And they said that in their view, our debt is sustainable in the mid to long term, which I thought was, they were really glossing over the truth, or in blunt terms, they were lying. Because then the Auditor General prepared a report and said that our debt is not sustainable. And in fact, it isn't sustainable. We, I think, might hit the 100 trillion mark. And if we do, it means that we are slowly getting nearer to what I would call a bit of a debt distress situation. We are not yet there, but we are on the path to that direction. Yes. Now, the other issue is that where do we borrow also matters. If you're engaged in concessional borrowing, say from the World Bank and so on, you're likely to get a grace period. You know, they will give you time to repair and things like that. On the other hand, if you start borrowing from the domestic market, you will not enjoy those benefits. Not only will the rates be higher, but you will not enjoy those kinds of benefits. But most importantly, borrowing domestically crowds out the private sector. It means government is actively competing with the private sector for money. And if you're in a line, from a bank manager, and you're in a line,
all of a sudden you see
and the government is number 5, and there's 4 SMEs, you tell the SMEs, please first wait. You attend to the government. Government may take all the money, and then you tell the SMEs, we are sorry. Please
come to look for tax from them to pay the debt.
Exactly. And then, so I think that is for me a very serious situation that we need to address. Let's try as much as possible to keep our concessional lending lines. If we can talk to the World Bank, and I place a lot of emphasis on this because the World Bank has been lending us money since 1963. They give us fairly good terms, and they not only give us money, but they give us technical support, they advise us, and so on and so forth. So I think we need to expedite that discussion to ensure that it gets out of the way and that money gets back online. But most importantly, we need to cut our coat according to our cloth. We are spending too much on unnecessary things. I'm told that this whole rationalization is only going to save us 1 trillion. Why? My expectation is it should save us like
a lot more money than just that.
1 trillion is very negligible, to be honest. So I think that why go through all this burden, remove UNRWA and so on, and you
only going to save ourselves a very little amount of money.
And then we're not even sure if we are going to have efficiency against. Because I'm not sure when Ministry of Works, for instance, was still in charge of the roads, you know, there were more potholes than roads themselves. Now there has been certain improvements, particularly out of Kampala. See, now taking the road, this revamped road network back to UNRWA may just make the to Ministry of Works may just make the situation worse. So I think we need to, yes, we want to save 1 trillion shillings, but what should we save? What should we do away with? Personally, I wouldn't do away with UNRWA. I would make sure of making it more efficient or whatever, but I wouldn't do away with it. I think it has some results to show. There are some agencies that are, in my view, completely useless or doing the same thing, and this should be rationalized. The Export Promotions Board shouldn't be rationalized because it's critical to stabilizing the currency and other things. Now you're saying our exports are improving. Maybe they are doing a good job, you know, so why should we rationalize it? So I think we need to really go back and do a cost-benefit analysis so that we are not just rushing on a bandwagon. Let's rationalize it, and so on.
Okay, he had some sentiments about the rationalization that, if you don't mind, you can, share the context, especially if it plays well within making these agencies leaner instead of completely either having one swallow the other, only for us to save very little money. But the aspect of supplementary budgets and the inability of legislators to rein in on government on expenditure is something that if I were to present a scorecard, MPs would not score anything above a 4. You are doing so badly on reining in on the government on expenditure. Well, you are the government too, because you're one arm of it when it comes to your own pecs, wages, and everything that comes. The other day we were just hearing that the speaker's stipend when away on business that may not be official is just staggering. How do you rein in on the government on expenditure when you yourselves are fighting to get more money?
I think fiscal responsibility is the responsibility of government to strike a balance between our spending and our incomes. I do not want to dwell into the unknowns of expenditure of Parliament and social media. But the one thing that I know is that expenditure is driven or drives borrowing. The appetite to spend in Uganda
is too high.
Is pushing our country to borrow, even unnecessarily. Last year, I remember we are going unconcessional on a loan that was arranged by money lenders from Kenya, Amarugo. And if you look at the terms and the conditions of our borrowing, because you want
arranged something for government
to borrow, and if you look at the terms and conditions of that loan agreement, it is me who fought it, and that's one of the things I've done for this country. If you look at some of these unconcessional loans coming to Uganda, and in the name of borrowing to spend, you cry for this country. And that's why our debt burden continuously grows. I was very, very happy when he talked about the source of our borrowing. Where do we borrow? Do we go concessional or unconcessional? And of course, we all want concessional loans. But because of the issues we've mentioned, like human rights abuse, people no longer have the confidence to borrow Uganda on concessional terms. And that's why our government is being forced to borrow unconcessional. And that's where we are having a very big problem as a country. And when they fail to borrow on concessional terms, they come here and crowd the private sector. You start competing with business people. I mean, really, which country does that? These are the same people who are paying taxes. Now you are competing for the same money that they are supposed to use to invest. You find them in banks borrowing, government. And that, of course, it circulates our market. It takes away the money. People can no longer access money. Then we're going to be continuously asking ourselves questions. Why there is no investment? Because people do not have the confidence to invest in this country. Why? They are going to be out-competed by government. If you look at some of the business people, our locals, local suppliers, they produced, they supplied goods to government. Government is not paying them, and they are closing shop. Why? Because government is not paying their money. And now then we start asking questions. Why is our economy not growing? The big problem is government itself. And until they sort out themselves, until government sort out their issues, our country is continuously going to be driven backwards.
All right, time is fast eating into our ability to thresh out just about everything on this matter. I'd like to ask you, give us what should be like a wrap on debt management. You spoke about the credit facility to the IMF. What will happen if we do not meet that particular threshold? And then quickly, I don't know, with this one I will ask John Wargembe. We do not, there was an issue about there's a citizen who wants money declared illegal because it has the wrong signature. We do not have a bank governor. The other day I was like, hey, let me not wake up and make a 20K. It's no longer money worth taking to the market. But that's something I just want your 2 cents on it and how it's affecting the dollar situation versus the shilling, or is it the shilling versus the dollar? But most importantly, that credit facility and whether it's actually a way forward in managing debt.
I think it's futuristic because debt is in future, and sometimes people want to compare it with GDP, which is history. Which is history. And the present. The debt is settled out there. So when COVID came, we borrowed some money from the IMF to stabilize, manage the system. And it was quite handy. But you know, this money, IMF is not a long-term lender like World Bank and African Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank. For them, they come in to stabilize. So they will say, we are lending you money, it's 10-year loan. You have a grace period, 5 years, you don't have to pay. It can even be interest-free. Remember, that can go up to about 2 billion. Now, when you begin to pay, you're going to clear that in 5 years. If you divide your 2 billion by 5 years, you need to be filing some 400 million every year.
Sometimes it comes with a grant.
Yes, you can even put in a grant. So, at the end of the day, you want to be planning and say, what are my future debt obligations? You don't just say, I've done my debt sustainability now and sorted it out. Where are you going to be finding that money for IMF? In addition to the other loans that are not going to be stopping at that point in time. So we foresee a spike in the debt repayment when that IMF loan triggers that we need to be planning for now. And you can only pay that from your reserves. Our reserves are already on the margin. 3.7, 3.8, 3.6 billion dollars. But remember, we are importing goods that go up to $7 billion. So you don't want to pay debt, and then you can no longer import raw materials, spare parts, drugs, and a number of other things. Now, that for me is the strategy, not just the plan.
That's right.
So you need to be planning for those kinds of things. But policy making in Uganda is quite dicey. A pronouncement of the president is policy. Then people they want a district, they want something, that becomes policy.
And sometimes it causes commotion when people wake up and they say the president said.
Yes.
And then somebody at the local government asks, but there isn't a directive to it.
But also remember, there was a time a president had said he wanted to go to Russia. And then his doctors said, wait a minute, there's COVID.
Yeah.
We have found some COVID in you. He listened to that professional advice. So what are the professionals saying?
All right, there you are.
Okay. First of all, I would say that most Ugandans are concerned that we don't have a substantive governor at the central bank. But it's also good, the fact that the central bank has been able to run smoothly without a substantive governor also shows that there's a certain rate of institutional robustness there. But that does not mean that we can have that position vacant. If it can be vacant and the central bank can run smoothly, then why is it there? We had better eliminate it and say the central bank can run smoothly without a governor, and we move on. So I think the issue is that the law has a lacuna. It does not give a time frame within which a governor ought to be appointed. And this is something that ought to be addressed going forward so that we don't find ourselves in this same situation. I think the president is struggling between choosing a professional as well as someone who is politically astute and loyal. A lot of professionals just emphasize professionalism, economics, and they don't have an eye to the political realities. Then you also have political actors who are not competent. So I think the president wants to find someone like the late Mutebile who can tick both boxes, and unfortunately there are not many. So I think that for me may be the challenge at the moment. This person who has gone to a court of law, I'm not sure whether, because the other one is legal tender. You know, it's not, legal tender is not pegged to a person or whatever, so I don't really see a lot of merits. I think that court case is simply meant to nudge the president to do the needful. I think there are some people who are on the short list, and they are trying to expedite his decision making by sponsoring some of these lawsuits, but I don't think it has any future there.
All right, and because we are out of time, Honorable, I will allow you to give us a brief update on the budget framework paper and the aspects that are in there that could actually put Uganda on the path to recovery.
Of course, the BFP is on its way. You look at my take home for Ugandans is are the sectors that are not funded, because if you look at our investment options and where do we want the country to invest money, they are not prioritizing some sectors like education, health sector, and of course infrastructure. And that's where I have a problem. If you look at where their interest of investment is, they want to put money in State House, they want to put money in security, Ministry of Defense, and that's the imbalance I see going forward. And then the other issue is, of course, the depreciation of our currency. That is going to have a very big impact on how we plan going forward with our budget. Because if the currency continues to depreciate, it means whatever we are doing now may be rendered somehow incompetent, given the new rates that we shall be working on.
Okay, gentlemen, many thanks for your perspectives. This conversation cannot be exhausted in a single morning on Morning at NTV, but I'm glad that you've emboldened our understanding of these matters. I do hope that whoever is out there, you are one that holds the pen and you're able to sign off many of the projects and disbursements, that we begin to do the things with a little bit more caution and understanding of these matters in order for socio-economic transformation to be achieved. I have been joined by Dr. Fred Muhumuza. He's a renowned economist and a leading commentator on matters economics. I've also been joined by Hassan Chirumira, the Honorable Member of Parliament for Katikamu South. He's also a member of the Committee on National Economy, and John Walgembe, the Executive Director at the Federation for Small and Medium Enterprises. Let's now go to Lunguja, where events yesterday saw the assassination of one of the clan heads, but I do understand that a few modalities here and there are still being worked on, and that update will be coming to you later on. For now though, allow me sign off and thank you for being part of this discussion. It's always a pleasure having your company on behalf of the team behind the scenes that ensure this is a smooth 2.5 hours of talk and also a bit of infotainment that should be able to allow you to take on the very best decisions in order to perfect the hustle. No doubt, it's always a pleasure. I'm Chris Higenyi.